welcome to today's video in which I thought I would share a little bit about some of the things that I learned on the health and wellness journey that I started a couple of years ago. So a little backstory to that is I had kind of reached a point where I just wasn't happy with the way that I was living. I just kind of felt very exhausted and sluggish a lot and just kind of in a foggy headspace all the time. And I knew that I needed to make some changes because I could tell that I was not living the way that I felt that I could be and doing the things that I knew would make my body feel good. So I decided to make some changes, and this time I wanted it to be different. I had kind of hit rock bottom and was just something that I knew that I wanted and needed to do for myself. So I started implementing changes and I wanted to make them more permanent. And since making those changes, I felt so much better physically and mentally, and weight loss was not my number one goal. It was something that I kind of hoped would happen because I had gained some weight and my clothes weren't fitting as well anymore. So that was just really hard. So even though it was not my main goal, because I knew that if I focused on that was not going to help me sustain the changes, and it was not going to be good for my mental health. But I did end up losing about 45 pounds. And of course, with pregnancy, I've put some of that back on. I am currently about 5 months, almost 5 months postpartum. I will say that pregnancy kind of threw me for a loop in terms of my lifestyle, and pregnancy was more so just about trying to get through each trimester the best that I could. And obviously, like, there were ups that came with the downs, but it's still my lifestyle did not look the same during that time. And postpartum has been mostly about taking care of my baby. That has been my number one priority. And then just, doing what I need to fuel my body to keep my milk supply up. So now that I am feeling a lot better and a lot more healed, and I'm getting into a little bit more of a routine and starting to feel like a human being again, I had decided to revisit some of those things that I had learned during my journey, and in doing so has made me decide to share some of those things with other people in case those things can be helpful to you. And so I just kind of condensed them into the top things that I felt really made a difference. I will also preface this with the fact that this is not a one-size-fits-all journey. Some of these things might be helpful to some people, and other tips that I have may not apply. So don't necessarily think that this is the only way to go about meeting your goals. Every body is unique and different, and so what works for some people might not work for others. So you kind of have to figure out what works best for you. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about, and I say this first because I think it's the most important, and that is, if you're not ready to make changes, then it's not going to happen. You have to be in that mindset where you truly want it. And because I've been there before, and you have to want it for, I think, deeper reasons than weight loss, because it's kind of a surfacey thing and it's not sustainable. So you can start trying to make changes, but ultimately you're just going to feel like you're forcing yourself to do it. And me personally, I know that when I feel like I'm being forced to do it, it doesn't work. So I don't like that I had to get to a point where I kind of felt like I hit rock bottom to start making these changes. But for me, I guess that's what it took. So then, on a related note, you have to ask yourself why you want to make these changes, what your reasons are, and having weight loss being a part of it, there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that having a deeper reason, such as wanting to have more energy, wanting to feel better in your body, wanting more mental clarity. Maybe there's, a exercise goal or a sporting type of goal, like you want to run a half marathon or something like that. And in order to be able to do those things, you want to make some changes to the food that you're eating, or the movement that you're doing with your body throughout the day. Maybe it's that you want to make sure that you're living a healthy life so that you have a better chance of living longer. Whatever the case may be, I do think that that will mean more to you than weight loss, because when you think about long term and you think about it as a lifestyle rather than a diet, for me, throwing diets out the window was one of the best decisions I ever made, because it helped me to think about this as small steps and small changes to make a lifestyle and make habits, and not to just cut things out and take shortcuts to get where I wanted. So another thing I wrote down was to not make foods off limits. I think by telling yourself that you can't have something, it just makes you crave it more. At least that was the case for me. So I never wanted to tell myself that I couldn't have certain things. And I think also by doing that, it kind of gives that food too much power. So I think by not making any foods off limits, it just feels so much more freeing. And then you also are much less likely to eat more of that food than you intended to. So another one that's kind of related is to stop thinking about foods as inherently good or bad, because those words should be associated with things that are moral or immoral, and food is not moral or immoral. Food is food. So I think labeling them as such is misleading to our minds, and instead we should think about it as a type of fuel. And some foods have more nutrients than others, but ultimately food is food. And sometimes we want food that's going to fuel our bodies and give us energy. Sometimes we want food that's simply going to fuel our souls. and there is nothing wrong with either of those options. So another one that I think is important, starting small is the best place to start, because if you try and do too much at once, it's going to be overwhelming. And if it doesn't work out when you're trying to do all those things at once, it might cause you to give up. And I think the smallest place that you can start is first by doing absolutely nothing except for just being more mindful about how you feel throughout the day. So don't try making any changes to your diet or to your physical exercise. Just think about, just take some time during the day to think about how you're feeling. Maybe it's after each meal. Maybe it's, in the afternoons when sometimes you reach for that cup of coffee because you feel like you need a pick-me-up. And just be more mindful about, be a little bit more in the moment, I guess is the best way to put it. And kind of check in with your body, like, how am I feeling after eating this, or how am I feeling after doing X, Y, and Z. So that can be a good place to start, because I think a lot of us kind of are on autopilot a lot. So I think that doing that can give us some information on where to go next, because if you're noticing that certain things that you're eating don't make you feel very good, then you're more likely to want to make some changes in regards to those foods. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about that I think is would be like next steps after trying to be more mindful is, don't focus on cutting things out, but instead try to add things in. So for example, one of the things that I really enjoyed eating was macaroni and cheese, and I didn't want to give that up. So at first, instead of cutting back on it or eliminating it altogether, I instead would make it with broccoli. I would cook broccoli in with the macaroni and cheese. And so then I knew that I was getting more nutrients and also still being able to eat the food that I love and the same serving, but I was benefiting from it. So it was not about cutting things out. It was not about restricting. It was about trying to add things in. And ultimately, the hope is that you start to crave those more nutrient-dense foods more often, and they start to sort of take the place of those less nutritious foods. But it definitely does make it easier when I mix them in with the foods that I do enjoy, and it definitely has helped me crave them more, and it's just made it easier to incorporate into my diet. So another thing is, if there are things that you really don't want to compromise on, then don't. Examples for me are substitutions, like using Greek yogurt instead of sour cream or mayo in certain things. It's just not the same for me. I don't like it and I can't do it. And to me, there's no reason to if you don't like the taste of something. And so instead, I just try to be more mindful of how much of that food that I eat, because if I'm not feeling, if I'm feeling kind of like sluggish or have a bit of an upset stomach after I eat it, then of course I don't want to do that to myself. So I'm more mindful of how much of it I eat, but I would much rather have those things on occasion and in quantities that I know that I'm not going to feel after I eat them, than force myself to substitute those things and just not enjoy it. Another thing for me is cereal. If I eat cereal, which I don't do often, but I grew up on cereal, so I will occasionally have cereal, and when I do, I thoroughly enjoy it. But one of the things that was, I feel like, out there for a while as kind of a diet food option was having almond milk with your cereal instead of cow's milk, and or some other non-dairy milk. And I have tried all of the options out there. Nothing tastes as good with cereal as cow's milk. So it's those kinds of things that if you're not willing to compromise, then don't do it, because ultimately it's not worth eating those foods in a way that doesn't taste good to you. Another one was making movement in your day a habit and picking things that you actually enjoy doing. So if you don't like to go jogging, then don't go jogging. It doesn't matter if you think that it's going to be some sort of, magic trick to getting the body that you always wanted, or whatever the case may be. If it's not an activity that you enjoy, you're not going to want to do it, and then it's not going to be sustainable. And making a point to include it in your day, even if it's not something that you typically do, you only have 5 minutes, it's just a couple of walks around the block, whatever it looks like to you for that day, make it a habit, because motivation can come and go, but the habits will stay with you. So it's kind of like brushing your teeth. No one really loves brushing their teeth. I'm sure many of us like how our mouths feel after we brush our teeth, especially if we can tell that we need to, but no one really loves brushing their teeth. But it's a habit, and it's just something you do to take care of your body. So I kind of think of it that way. So it's just something that it was just something that I would incorporate into my day with whatever I had time to do. And so on a related note, if you're not exercising very much right now, don't try and go from 0 to 60. So when I first started, I had definitely done a lot of exercise in the past. One of the ways that I tried to lose weight was the Insanity program, which that one is mostly just an exercise program, and you can get advice and suggestions on what to eat throughout the day. The program is mostly focused on exercise, and that is exactly how it sounds. It's an insane program. It is not for the faint of heart. And yes, it worked. I was in the best physical shape that I had probably been in my entire life. And I'll admit that it was cool to see myself go from being able to only do, 1 or 2 push-ups to being able to do 10 to 15, and just being able to see that progress in my physical strength and stamina. But that was not sustainable for making permanent changes in my lifestyle. That was not an exercise program that I could keep doing for the rest of my life, because at that time that I did that program, I basically had no social life. My life was focused just on going to work and coming home and doing those workouts and then going to bed. That was basically my life, because any sort of other things with social life usually was centered around eating or drinking. And in order to get through those workouts, I could not eat or drink. Like alcohol was not going to help me be able to get through those workouts. So yes, it had the effect that I wanted at the time, but once I was done, I was done. And so when I did exercise this time around, when I decided that I wanted to make permanent changes, I started by just telling myself that I would do something each day, even if that was only 5 minutes, just like a 5 or 10 minute exercise video. There's so many on YouTube, and I will link some of my favorite channels in the description box. I also, or just, going for a walk around the block, just something to move my body every day. So to me, starting there and thinking about that was so much easier than thinking about some sort of like really intense exercise program to have to do every day. So a lot of the times when I would do those things, I would end up doing a second short video, or if I was going for a walk, it would end up, being a few more blocks, or would usually turn into a longer session. But even if it didn't, the prospect was still a lot more doable in my mind. So it wasn't something that I felt like I was going to give up on. And then when I would do those things consistently every day, it felt good to see myself being able to make those changes and to sustain those changes. So then, hi guys, I just wanted to hop on quick because there was something that I decided was worth mentioning because it could derail your progress. And I realized that my lighting right now is not the best, but I had an opening and I just decided to take it because baby girl is content right now. So we're going for it. So the thing that I wanted to mention was to stop the negative self-talk. And what I mean by that is not to necessarily go straight to the self-love, because while that is obviously the ideal end goal, I think for me, I know for sure, and for probably a lot of other people, it's really hard to go from the self-hate to the self-love. So I think for me, it was more about body neutrality. So it was more about self-respect and appreciation. So not criticizing myself all the time and trying to catch myself when I was saying negative things about myself and to just stop. I'm not saying to go stand in front of your mirror and, pick out all the things that you would have considered to be negative and say things like, oh, I love my cellulite, or I love that stretch mark, and I love that roll, and just, I don't think that that's feasible. It felt weird to me and it didn't feel genuine. So I focused instead on just trying to stop being so negative about myself and to instead respect my body for what it can do for me and appreciate what it can do for me. And I know that it's important and I know that it makes a difference, because I think that was one of the reasons why the insanity program that I did worked for me for the time that I was doing it. It was because I was able to see the progress that I was making. So every time that I would do I think it was like a weekly test, and you would see how many more of a certain move that you could do. It motivated me and encouraged me to keep going. And so that's why I think being able to be positive is really helpful. And so it's really important to set yourself up for success by giving yourself smaller goals so that they're attainable. And then when you do see yourself being able to make those changes and do those things, all it does is fuel that desire to keep going. And by making them easier to attain, you're also helping yourself to make it a habit, and therefore it being easier to do and just have it become part of your life and not feel so overwhelming. and discouraging and wanting to give up. So, okay, I think that was everything that I wanted to mention. So back to the original video. I really felt like those helped me maintain my new lifestyle, and there are things that I wish that I had known from the beginning. So I hope that at least some of these can be helpful to you. And if there's anything that you have learned in your experiences that you think people could benefit from, or that you think I could benefit from, I would definitely be interested to know. So leave those in the comments below and let me know if you have any questions. And I plan to do more videos like this. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.